I'm just picking up from where we left off.
Yeah, just let me know when you want to start, and then I'll
Yeah.
just say things once and not keep repeating myself.
Well, we'll start. We started now. Let's just say.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So so we kind of picked things up from when we met. So I think it was was it 2 weeks ago at Toby Young's event, the Free Speech Union Speakeasy in Manchester at the Anthony Burgess Foundation, and we had a chat, didn't we? We met for I wanted to go with somebody because I was a bit nervous about going, and then we talked on WhatsApp, and I'd noticed you've been getting quite a lot of criticism from. I don't like to say both sides because sometimes when people say both sides, it's kind of sounds like everybody has equal weight in those, but with anything like this, free speech is not a level playing field, is it? And some people have got a bigger platform than others. And you had quite a big platform. You had quite a lot of followers on social media, which came from your involvement with the LGB Alliance. So I was just wondering how you felt about that, because, like, obviously, once you get to a certain position of people know who you are, do you feel like you have to please your audience then? And you found it quite difficult when those people attacked you because you were seen with me. Was that a big deal for you? Or is it something you could rush off?
It's a lot to go through. I'll do my best. So first of all, it's a pleasure to join you on my podcast. Thank you for the invitation. I'll address with Free Speech Union first. I'm a huge fan of their work, proud to be a member, supporter, but I don't represent them. I'm not employed by them or anything formal like that. We were both going to the event independently, and we're chatting. We said, "Oh, we're both going to be at this thing. Both got ordered our tickets separately. Let's meet up beforehand and chat about where the land lies, find some common ground, see each other as human beings, not just an avatar on a screen where things can get very impersonal and people will tweet all sorts of things that they wouldn't say to somebody's face." So that was my main concern. I felt we achieved that. We share different political beliefs, but we were able to see each other as human beings and to personalize the person behind that screen that I was sending messages to. I give you a bit of background information at the time about what Free Speech did, the structure of the event. So I've been to lots of their events, and very often people in the audience don't get a chance to talk because there's a couple hundred people in the crowd. There's half an hour for questions. But it was important to me that as they delivered on, anybody attending their events was treated with respect, given the same opportunity to ask questions. And as I expected that they would, they gave you that platform to ask a question, and you got a detailed answer from Toby Young, including the detail that he said that he would represent, or the Free Speech Union would support a trans rights activist if they'd faced similar discrimination and harassment in the workplace for their beliefs as somebody with gender critical beliefs. So I think you were given, you were shown respect and given the same platform to ask a question. But I do understand that at these events, it's usually an hour of hearing, the promoted panelists, and like that panel you went to with Helen Joyce. You were both given the opportunity to have your speeches and discussion with speakers, but not everybody gets that same opportunity if they're going as a guest. So shall I focus more on the other parts of the question?
I just wanted to say, because I knew that they would let me speak. It's a free speech event. It would have been quite ironic if they'd have said, "Frida, you're not allowed to speak because you're a trans woman," or whatever they wanted to call me.
Certainly, yeah, it would have been an echo chamber event.
It would have been absolutely. It would expose them as the fraud that they could possibly be seen as. But the point was that, Toby Young did say he would defend my free speech, but really, the problem for me is the balance of power is not with me, because like the guest that Toby Young had on the stage with his communications officer, I forgot her name now, Jan something. I'll add that a bit later. I'll put some
Yeah,
information.
look, Varys or somebody.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so you know that if I wouldn't have the connections or the kind of publicity drive, because that's what they actually do. The Free Speech Union don't actually deal with law. They might consult with lawyers, and if they've got a case for somebody, they'll find those lawyers. But what the Free Speech Union actually do is publicize and elevate something into the media, and that's how those cases become the thing in the Daily Mail, and then the thing that gets talked about on GB News or Talk TV. It becomes part of the discourse in the media, and that is the job of the Free Speech Union. It isn't necessarily to find a judicial outcome or a tribunal outcome. That is for that person to, they could guide them along that path. But I don't know of any cases where, if you look at the people that work at the Free Speech Union, they're not lawyers. They may have some lawyer training, but they're employed as lawyers. They're all PA company kind of people. So that is what the Free Speech Union actually do. So when Toby Young says, yes, if you had a case for, well, I do have a case, because interestingly, the LGB Alliance wrote to my employer to tell them that I should not be working for them because I'd openly criticized Bev Jackson and a couple of other people. And on to be fair, I was quite vocal, and I said some things I probably shouldn't have said, but that's mine to deal with. But I know that the only reason they were isolating me and is the fact that I was trans. If my name had been Fred something, and they didn't, they wouldn't have bothered. I know that for a fact. So that's where I diverge. I don't go along with Toby Young's answer at all, because I know that it wouldn't happen for me. They wouldn't see me as worthy of the media, because they work in the right-wing media. They're not there to platform trans people. There is very little media out there for us. You occasionally get some. And I think the biggest kind of articles I've seen on trans rights have come from the Byline Times. Sometimes you'll get something in the iPaper. We are battling a very big right-wing media machine. So yeah, that was a long answer. I'm sorry about that, but
you've had a number of invitations to TV interviews.
Yeah, but I didn't get invited. I had to force myself into. I have to write to producers myself and say, you said this was wrong. I'll tell you why it's wrong if you want me to. And sometimes, of 10 of those, I might get one reply, and then I'll go on. But people on the, say, LGB Alliance side, on Sex Matters, Women's Rights Network, Fair Play for Women, they employ people to work within the media, so they don't have to do that banging on doors. The door is already open for them. They just have to walk through it or present somebody who can talk in the media, and they already have that platform. So I don't represent an organization. I'm just Frida Wallace, trans rights activist. I sometimes work with the LGBT Foundation in Manchester, but I don't represent them. I'm a volunteer. I don't have the backing of them. So that's the difference. But I do want to talk about this idea of free speech, because I believe, Alex, you have.
Can I reply to just a couple of those points? Because I respect we've got different, the things you're saying aren't necessarily my views, vice versa, obviously. I have met a number of people that have worked with the free speech who have received excellent legal advice, and in some cases rather large amount of compensation following discrimination cases. So I think it's slightly unfair to accuse them of something sort of guilty without charge for something they haven't done. Were you to approach from somebody else in a situation of discrimination? That's something for them to answer. As I said, I'm not the spokesperson, but I have massive sympathy for this frustration of anybody on either side being a sort of everyman, just feeling like one small dot against this monolith legal structure of lawyers and courts and huge. We don't all have the money, resources, and connections of people like J.K. Rowling or the LGBT lobby groups and the side. There's a lot of people stuck in the middle. It's one of the reasons I was brought with Free Speech Union, because they do represent those everyday normal people looking for protection from from discrimination, persecution, and free speech matters.
But
I sympathise with your desire just to be heard, to have a voice in the debate, where it's often the same people with the legal backing, with the crowd funders behind them, and that can be very alienating. It's a general political problem. I think most people, if you ask on the street who they're going to vote for, what the politics are, they feel very detached from the parliamentary institutions and the Commons, the Lords. They feel there's huge money there and investment campaign money, and it's much harder for the smaller parties like the Social Democratic Party I support to sort of get a foot in the door and get a seat at the debating circle. So
but just to add to that, it's like, I mean, I'm not a political party, and I'm not part of a lobby group, and I'm not part of any media or any organization. So like when you mentioned J.K. Rowling there, and it's really interesting that you do. I mean, J.K. Rowling just this week has been seen to give £70,000 to one single lobby group. Now, if a trans person could do that to help a grassroots advocacy organization, we'd be laughing. We'd be on the telly all the time, wouldn't we? But this is the schism. This is the unlevel playing field that trans people and non-binary find themselves in. So we're always fighting that uphill battle. But the only way I've managed to do it is just by sheer doggedness and turning up at events like Toby Young's, because a lot of people told me not to do it, and they'll say you're putting yourself in danger. There'll be people there want to insult you, and I'll say,
a lot of people. We were sat there over dinner, and our phones were lighting up with the same messages from both sides, weren't they? They're dangerous. You're not safe. They're grooming you.
Well,
all these horrible accusations.
Yeah. Well, that was quite hurtful, because when our detractors call us groomers, groomer is a very specific word that relates to a very specific kind of abuse. I know people say, oh, it means you're just trying to bring somebody into your mindset. No, it doesn't. So when that word, especially for people that have suffered abuse, that word is a trigger, and it should not be diminished for what it is. So I didn't find he seems to have I don't know if he's got like a online persona and then a personal, you know what I mean? Some people have a bit of a online avatar, don't they? Do you know what I mean? So they've got to play to their crowd. But do you feel, I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but the reason I mentioned Andrew Doyle is because I saw what happened to you for being associated with me happened to Andrew Doyle for being associated with Debbie Hayton. And he was simply,
I'm going to say it feels by proxy, doesn't it?
And he was simply, but I see Debbie Hayton disagrees with me, and I disagree with her, because I had a bit of an argument with her about pronouns, and I said, what are you then, Mr. Debbie? Because she said I don't use she, her, and I said, well, people just call you that because it's natural for them to do so. It's not a big deal. But she was like saying, no, I'm Dr. Debbie. I was like, okay. So but then I wrote to her later, and I said, look, I'm really sorry I did that, because your identity, Debbie, is yours. It's not for me to decide that. So I did say sorry for doing that. But the point I was trying to make was that this whole pronouns argument is kind of ridiculous, because people just kind of react to the thing that they see in front of them, don't they? And some people get that wrong.
Yeah. There's been something of a split into the gender critical activists. I think of like Kathleen Stock, who were raising issues of single-sex spaces, things like the hospital wards, the prisons, matters of education, and these ultra radicals that have appeared and that are fighting in the nth degree over the pronouns. So they're using slurs like autogynephile, but then they would use the term lesbian or gay instead of homophile. And that to me, I mean, it's not a word commonly in the language.
They like that word.
You could use that term homophile if somebody wanted to. It would be linguistically correct. Look it up on Google. It's a real word with real meaning, but they choose not to use that word. And homophile,
it's because
or have connotation, sounds like paedophile, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say there. That's the only reason that word is used and repeated is because of its suffix "phile." because you can be Anglophile, you can be a, you know what, the file thing is not necessarily offensive.
File, yeah.
But the reason it's used by the, I would call anti-trans activists is because it's a weapon, isn't it? The word becomes a weapon because it's not codified in any sort of psychology book. It's just something that I think the guy's called Blanchard and he did a paper on it, and it's just, what is it? I mean, I'm sure there are men out there that get turned on by dressing up, but is that what it is? You know what I mean? Because I know a lot of women that do. You know what I mean? So but the thing is, they've always got to associate trans women with a sexual threat, and that's why that is used. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but because we've met, and
I do agree with women. I don't speak on any women's behalf. I've listened to a range of views, and I can understand that there's risks attached to opening single-sex spaces to self-ID, and that includes myself as a male. They're not saying that every single man is a sexual predator, is a danger, but as a class of people, there's something different about the male biology and chemistry and patterns of behaviour as a class that it's their space to decide for themselves. And there is a difference in binary immutable biological sex. But holding that viewpoint, and as you were the for-starter ruling, that viewpoint as a political matter is protected speech and threat to be held, but it doesn't have to be expressed with targeted hate, absolutely gunning for somebody. The sort of abuse you have received and others, where your photos are spread around and the most horrible slurs attached to you. I don't see that conduct as, and I've succumbed to it before. It feels very like any sort of argument that gets heated. It feels in the spur of the moment very fulfilling and exciting. But actually, when I meet somebody like yourself and have a face-to-face conversation, I think, okay, what do I believe politically? Why do I believe that politically? What's this person saying, and how does that integrate with what I believe, why I believe it? And this is a person sat in front of me that these decisions and this language affects. So how do I express that in a courteous way? And all those rules of engagement that most of the mainstream gender political activists, not this wave of ultra radicals like Kelly J. Keane, people like Kathleen Stock, Debbie Hayton, the people at this morning debate about conversion therapy, are following those sorts of unwritten rules of engagement of showing courtesy, respecting free speech, showing humanity to other people. And that's certainly how I want to conduct myself, and how the people that persuade me, and I see persuading people who are outside of these echo chamber bubbles, where they're using language like peaking and AGP. So those bizarre constructed language that doesn't mean anything to anybody outside of those spaces. They've become a sort of cult in themselves.
Well, what happened there was they were partaking in homophobic slurs. They don't. Some of those people, they've come at this through the door of transphobia. I suppose that's what it is. And they call it peaking. So they've been peaked into these arguments about sports, prisons, single-sex spaces, but they've been radicalized on the way out, even further down that road. So they cannot see anybody that even stands with the trans woman, or even as a conversation with, it's almost as if I'm hypnotizing you. It's like I'm the demon who's found a victim, and you're the victim. Yeah. That takes your autonomy away, because that's also saying that Alex doesn't have his own mind.
I'm allowed to think for myself, make my own judgments, and hear from a range of perspectives. That's called being in a free society. It does concern me, people on either side or any political topic, just hearing the same arguments again and again and again, spending all of their time on social media, and putting out posts that to me do not seem to be advancing a political point. They seem exclusively engineered to cause somebody trauma. Now that's frustrated me from my perspective on extremely personal, hurtful comments about my civil partner. I don't want to discuss on this space and aspects of my personality and character that don't advance political debate. And I've seen the same slurs and targeting comments made about you. But as I said, I do not see certain nobody elected to Parliament acting in that way. They have more decorum. And actually, we've seen a number of debates in the House of Lords and the House of Commons. We've got ones approaching on conversion therapy legislation. Like, this issue has reached the national media now. It's sort of reached the living rooms of the nation. It's on people's minds. It's been front page of the newspaper. So
it's going to be a big key point for Labour.
I
think they're going to be quizzed on this.
I'm not interested in this ultra radical side of it. It does feel at points as if there's a lot of aggression and desire to attack somebody, and some of these arguments create an opportunity, an excuse to post very nasty, hateful content. Now, that's not the same as, I don't want to censor anybody because I believe in free speech, but there's a certain type of speech where if I see somebody making that, I don't want to be associated with it because I don't think it's actually changing people's minds or advancing anybody's dignity or rights. I think it's just purely hateful, and I'm exhausted at seeing that from these ultra radical, of which I mean, we have different views. I wouldn't classify LGBT Alliance in that group. I wouldn't classify Free Speech Union. I wouldn't classify Andrew Doyle in that. But I do classify Standing for Women.
Can I ask you about LGBT Alliance? Because I believe you were quite close to LGBT Alliance for a while, and you attended the conferences. Do you feel like you moved away from that now, or do you think just your politics have changed?
Well, I'm like yourself. I'm not associated with, like I mentioned with free speech, I'm not associated with either them or LGBT Alliance as an employee, formal representative.
Yeah. No, but there was a time when you were going around with an LGBT Alliance t-shirt.
I wouldn't donate to LGBT Alliance. I don't, because I support charities where the money that's donated goes directly into the hands of the benefactors. So whatever the court. I have a general frustration with charities that have a lot of middlemen taking huge amounts of profits. And, they've chosen to do what they do, but to see so many donations, so much money go to so few lawyers, that's a general frustration I have with the legal system, with the sort of lawyers make all the money, and the everyday people like me and you sort of don't see much direct benefit. But they do what they do, and
this was one of the main criticisms of LGBT Alliance from trans people and from people that are our allies, is that what are they actually doing? Because like I said, I volunteer with the LGBT Foundation. You can see what they do. They do sexual health, they do mental health, they help with homelessness.
I've used those services before. You can walk in and have an appointment in counselling session with somebody. You can attend an addiction support group. You can access mental health support. They're doing, there's a lot of that charity I disagree with, and I've myself had very.
Yeah, but the point is,
they are doing things practically measurable.
Yeah, but like I was saying, we don't see on the ground many people that they're, like you've said, that they're helping. So and there are very few people, like say gay, lesbian, bisexual people, that actually seem to be promoting them. It all seems quite centralized, quite Westminster, very Tufton Street. So, and I'm sure you know what I mean.
I can understand the frustrations. I've got huge respect for people, even whose politics I disagree with, that are doing direct, cold-based work. Book a library meeting room, hold a discussion group or a support group or a campaign group, or go out to a food bank or whatever your kind of cause is.
Yeah.
Go out and grassroots, cold-face, do it. Less of this sort of Westminster energy. whatever
Well,
visual.
the problem is, Alex, like say if I did invite you to a meeting and it was LGBT Foundation, just your name would ring alarm bells in people's heads if because they're aware of your little protests and you were kicked. Like when I had messages from people saying, "Why are you fraternizing with fascists?"
I had the same about you. Yeah,
So they call me a fascist. That's funny. But I know
a
the
lot
kind
of
of thing.
fascism around, isn't
You
there?
see, the problem with me is I'm very open with my social media content, and you may have noticed there are images of me that people might find incongruent because on my Instagram I've got like quite an open attitude to sex and body positivity. So when I'm quite easy for people to grab pictures of and say, this is who Frida really is. Look at this pervert. Because you can take a lot of my stuff out of its original context and then recontextualize that when when I've been on the TV trying to make a political point, what they'll do is they'll crop the bit where I'm on the telly and then put it with the bit where I'm in the club or I'm out having a drink or from my Instagram. And that's frustrating for me, but I've got used to it. Now, what does not happen to the other side? I mean, I have seen misogyny directed at Mayor Forstater. I've been guilty of that, because we do make the mistake of looking at the way somebody looks and then going to look at, but I think when you get it all the time, it's kind of a defense mechanism. So I have made the mistake of criticizing people on the way they look, of when they've had a bad day. So we shouldn't do that. But
I have to, yeah.
But that's a very Twitter energy, isn't it? That's a very social media thing. But Mayor Forstater was just this week retweeting pictures of somebody that was in the John Lewis's internal. I don't know if you saw this story. There was, the John Lewis's.
I've seen the latest.
Yeah, so
each week some company or another, isn't it? So
yeah, there's no need to hyper focus like that on individuals. I understand what she's trying to do. She's trying to link them with sexual perversion, like she did with me. But it's abuse. It's actually because it's like revenge porn in a way. It's kind of like people don't understand the seriousness of that. No, some people have said to me, Frida, well, you put those images out there, so how dare you complain about it? But it's the context that's important. And on social media, anyone can see that. I choose who sees my images. I choose the channels that they come through. I curate my experience. I don't want somebody like Mayor Forstater curating something like that, because that to me, it's visual abuse. This is why I mentioned before, do you think there are some people that are more kind of polite and respectable in this movement? But honestly, I find that because to me, Kelly, I mean, we mentioned Kelly J. Keane, but for me, sometimes I think she is more honest. She's less duplicitous. She's not somebody that's using doctor or professor in her name and using that to sell something. She's not somebody that's claiming to be a spokesperson for a Christian organization. She's just some lunatic on YouTube making quite entertaining content. Now, obviously, it's transphobic, but in terms of what she's actually doing, she's more honest. So it's very confusing to keep when you are consuming this stuff, because we're all in the same bit stream, aren't we? We're all in this same very narrow bandwidth that's coming at us all the time. So sometimes
I'll clarify my have moderate gender critical views, which I recognise the importance of.
Well, I suppose that's what I'm asking. Is there such a thing as a moderate gender critical view? Because
I think there is. I think an important distinction is focusing on facts and political argument. I think the examples we've explored so far have an element of hyperbole in them. So when I met you, I genuinely believed that you had sent directed, unsolicited messages. So, in DMs or equivalent, you'd have, say, in the post, it would have been historically, to a single named person with your genitals in them, of an explicit pornographic, with the intention to cause that person distress. I also believe that you owned a sex dungeon and that you ran events there in I did my research anyway. And when I actually looked through the details of that, both of those statements that had been repeated many times were hyperbolic, and they were lies, because that step, I've talked about this in another short recording, but that steps from a dispute that gets heated, people disagree, and the police look at and see no evidence of wrongdoing, and people having very emotive thoughts about a topic. But that steps a line into the criminal, into accusing you of having committed a criminal act for which you, if you had committed that, should face prosecution and justice. Now, to cross that line, it is just totally wrong, whatever anybody's political beliefs. It's also something that MPs couldn't do and don't do. It goes into totally lies. Now, I've had those same accusations made at me over other topics. I've been told a number of times that I've assaulted or harassed or trans people, usually, in my context, which I haven't done. I've never harassed anybody. If I have harassed somebody, if somebody believes that, they should report that to the police. It should be investigated. I haven't. So those are incredibly damaging statements about my character that are false, because again, it's accusing me of a crime that I haven't committed. Now, heated disagreements that don't constitute harassment under law are a different matter, which both of us have engaged in. But that's my major concern. I know it's a point of detail that I'm very focused on.
Can I just add something to that?
But the difference between destroying somebody's life and employment prospects and friendship groups and their whole world, that sort of conduct can drive people to suicide. Well, it happens in the case of Wilson Gavin. There's been there are people dead because of these Twitter dramas that have escalated. Well, and what I've had all this venom at me for having met you is because of some Twitter drama between you and somebody with different views. And I'm absolutely sick of that. Huge respect for you meeting me, if I was able to have this conversation over the webcam.
If I can just clarify a little bit about that. So what happened was there's an account called Troony Troons, and they specifically find sexually charged images of cross-dressers, transvestites, trans women, and mix it all together and present that as this is what trans people are. And they're boosted and they're amplified by some very big accounts. And I know May Forstater follows them. I know Graham Linehan contributes to them, and some other very big accounts. Now, what they took images, I believe somebody fed them some images of me, and they already had they'd found pictures of me pre-transition, which is very upsetting, because they would have had to look and go and find those they would have had to be very determined to find those.
Yeah, using these images, save them and republish.
Yeah, you have to make a concerted effort over an extended period of time to do that. And they did that. And I thought, when I saw the people commenting in this thread with Graham Linehan and a few other people, which I won't name, that made me angry. And I thought, you've shared, they were complaining about me or saying I was some kind of like pervert. And I said, how dare you? Because you're the people, you're the abusers that find images of trans women and try to shame them and drive them to these, like you said, it can drive people to suicide. You said that. And that's true, because a friend of mine last year committed suicide. Now, it wasn't directly related to anything on Twitter. There was a lot of complex issues there, but I know how that feels to lose somebody. And I know how it feels to be that stressed and live in fear. But when this was happening to me, I had all this in my mind about my friend, and I was so angry that these people could get away with this, that I reposted some images. I said, yes, these are my images. This is me. This is who I am. What are you going to do about it? And the reason I did that is because I won't let anybody shame me ever. I'm not ashamed of any of my images. There's no pornographic content in those images. It's implied quite heavily sometimes, and it's quite creatively implied, but there's no sex acts in those images. There's no pornography. And I put it into a thread. And because I'd done that, that's when it kicked off, because I'd actually taken I'd actually taken the power away from them, and that's why it
There's
kicked
another
in.
element of this in terms of the witch hunt mentality, but there's no capacity for forgiveness. So if
Yeah.
you had committed some crime of harassment, something, it would go to magistrate's court, you would receive a few £100 fine, a community sentence. But you, and I'd say one, I'm not targeting you personally, but one would have the opportunity there to serve their sentence,
Yeah,
retribution, to level the playing field and to say, I've harmed this person, this is what I can do to repay that debt and to go back to a level playing field and not do it again.
well,
It's how entire justice system works. Now, you, myself, other people involved in these witch hunts are not given the opportunity to do that. Whatever apology you do, whatever recompensation, penance you perform, like, you will always be a villain to them.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
you have to suffer these pre-transition photos being published again and again and again. I will have accusations made about me publishing again and again and again, although I don't accept any wrongdoing of those accusations. Memes I've published in the past that are a bit immature, but and this is not justice. This is not the society we live in. It's not the framework of courts and sentencing and rule of law. And I believe in those things first and foremost. I'm small c conservative. I don't believe in this perpetual witch hunt of ruining people's lives far beyond a punishment that they would receive in a court. It's a sort of vigilanteism.
Well, yeah, I think that's very true, but because the police and the law does not support us. It's like we talk about hate crimes a lot, but getting something done about an online hate crime is pretty much non-existent at the moment. I mean, it'd have to be serious. It'd have to be absolute death threats to your email address for the police to take it seriously.
Ignore those because I've reported them and it's not gone anywhere. I've had hundreds.
The main drive for those people was to make me lose my job because I was working for the ambulance service at the time. And I was off with stress that the ambulance, because this had been going on before this. The LGBT Alliance, like I said, I wrote to my employer, a few other people involved in an organization called Fair Cop had done it. And I was so stressed out by all this that I was off work with stress. And then on top of that, this happened. So I was kind of on like, I was on I was getting to the end of my tether with it. And so I went into the office at work and I said, I don't know if these people are ever going to stop complaining about me. So we need to put something together to say, if you need to recognize that when they call me Fred, when they call me a bloke, they're not serious people. And they actually looked into that. But what happened next was, because I'd been posting so much and got so stressed out, I started to call people pejoratives, really abusive things because I was stressed. And that is what work got me on, because they said it's your social media conduct. So I had to admit, because I was in a meeting with my bosses and they were pulling up tweets onto a PowerPoint Imagine being in a room where your tweets are appearing on a PowerPoint presentation.
I've been in a police interrogation where my tweets have been shown to me after just been locked in a cell.
But just imagine,
it's all rather surreal, isn't it?
Just imagine seeing a picture of me out on a night out wearing next to nothing.
It's all a bit bizarre.
That's what happened to me.
A misdemeanor like that has a consequence. It has a defined disciplinary grievance process and investigation. Now, nobody, you or me, can be immune from that process, but it warning your employer that, look, these people are, I've done that of my current employer. I don't want to get involved in, again, I'm speaking from a personal capacity, but I've informed them, look, if there is a complaint that you want to investigate through a grievance complaint process, and absolutely comply with that, because anybody should, that's part of any working relationship. But to warn you, please, I would ask that you don't jump the gun and assume that everything that is said about me, is correct without having had a right to a defence and a reply. So how you approach that sounds quite assertive. If I'm accused of having done this, can I just have my say as well? And a proper grievance process should allow for, both sides to have
Yeah, well, there was that, but the problem is
a say on that.
the people that had vehemently complained about me, called me a pervert and a paedophile, believe it or not. They're not there in those meetings to answer to that. They're just, as far as my employer is concerned, they're just members of the public, and I'm a public-facing employer. I work for the ambulance service. So, as a public-facing person, if I'm calling people, even if it's in retaliation to somebody calling me a paedophile, it doesn't matter what I say back. They don't. Those people are not in. Those people are not on trial, are they? In the tribunal or whatever it is. It's me. And I have to answer to my words, and that's why I stood up and I owned it, and I said, "Look, I have done wrong," and that's why I mean, I wasn't sacked. I left because I knew this whole process was going to drive me to insanity. And the interesting thing about all this is the amount of resources it took to investigate me because of all these complaints from transphobes, people calling me ridiculous things, obviously things that aren't true. And within the NHS, there are people abusing all the time who go under the radar because they say, "Oh, she's a nice lady. How could she ever be a threat to anyone? How can this lady?" And they'll bring them into meetings and they'll be able to pull the wool over people's eyes, and it'll turn out that person's called Lucy Letby. And while all these transphobes are complaining about people like me and wasting all those resources on trying to basically harm me for no reason, apart from the fact that I'm trans and a bit gobby on social media, this is what happens when you hyper focus on trans issues, and it's really dangerous actually. And that's what I try to get across to people, because if the people that stand outside prisons shouting "no men in women's jails" and starts shouting at people at sporting events that men shouldn't be in women's sport, they're missing the whole point that we live in a world of systemic, institutional, and structural misogyny. And those people add to it by looking the wrong way. They put so much effort and energy into one trans woman that happens to be swimming in a it's not even an Olympic event. You know what I mean? They put all the pressure on parkrun just recently. There was only 6 trans women in the whole country that they could identify. It's like, why do that? It's just a fun run. Why are you trying to? And so when you can put that much resource and that much money and that much pressure onto an organization like Parkrun, it's just destructive. And that's I'm never going to see that any other way. I don't think you could convince me otherwise. But
well, I don't share a lot of those political viewpoints. I don't subscribe to the kind of critical theories of being institutions in terms of institutional racism, homophobia, transphobia. I believe in individuals' rights and rule of law, equality before the law. It depends on the topic really, but I don't.
Do you think
there's a lot you've said in this interview that I disagree with, but it's your right to. It's your perspective.
I didn't. Like I said, I didn't pull you on here to try and convince you and get into your mind and change it, because I think that's what they accused me of. They think that I can hypnotize you into changing your complete outlook on life.
That's something I found greatly insulting by a number of organisations I've previously been very close to and whose activism I still respect their right to be active and to have a voice for it. But it's incredibly insulting to tell me who I'm allowed to and not allowed to meet.
But I think I've noticed you saying things on Twitter. Sorry, I keep calling it Twitter. I always forget.
Yeah, formerly known as.
Yeah, but I've seen you sort of standing for some of the things I've said, but then today you were very much on the side of Christian Concern. Again,
I don't represent them, but they're another charity that huge amount of respect for. They're doing excellent work.
But they stand for conversion practices. They openly advocate for conversion practices. Now that's very difficult for me to square, as you Alex, having expressed yourself as a gay man, and then why would you support a charity? I mean, I don't know if you've contributed any money to them, but why would you defend a charity that obviously stands against, for me, it seems like everything you are? So that's very confusing for somebody like me.
The charity that I would donate to, but haven't donated to. I mean, we both watched the argument this morning. What they were defending is the right of persons like myself who choose to seek therapy that's in accordance to their deeply held religious beliefs. They weren't advocating extreme practices that are already illegal and are not taking.
Well, they might say that, but it's incremental, isn't it? It can be incremental. Like they might say, "Oh, we don't believe in the extreme stuff." What's the extreme stuff? Waterboarding. You know, it's like it's incremental. Abuse is not. It's always like once you open the door, it can be abused. So that's why we stamp things out. It's not because we're not nuanced or we can't think in that kind of way. It's because we recognize that once the door is open, then there are some people willing to march right through it. And the people that are like that are sometimes in positions of power in our institutions. And that is a serious worry because we know what we know what's happened recently with the Catholic Church and priests, and we don't need to go into the detail of that. I'm sure you know what I'm talking.
Can we assess more in less kind of abstract themes of I understand the sort of philosophy you subscribe to, like power structures and social movements, but so me as an individual perspective, I'm under the current laws free to approach charities such as True Freedom Trust, that I intend to, that has been recommended to me, and to describe my situation and to ask for counselling in accordance to my beliefs. So, well, I won't speak on their behalf here, but persons who seek to suppress their sexuality in line with their religious beliefs. Now,
but that would be your choice.
That's currently a freedom I have. What authorises you or anybody who opposes those types of practices, or on a government level, on a legal level, to remove that right from me? To tell me that I don't know what's best for me, that I'm not allowed to seek that therapy.
Well,
because if you chose, very authoritarian. You telling me, and not you personally. There's many organisations that you're working with at times, but you are telling me what I'm allowed to think and what services I'm allowed to ask. And I'm also seriously concerned about the consequences to people like Matthew Gregg, who have faced legal ordeals for publishing videos of his personal testimony of his beliefs. But again, there's no pressure. There's nobody being forced to watch that. There's no being forced to access those therapy services. So what authorises you or anybody else to control who I'm allowed to talk to in private and what conversations I'm allowed to have in private?
Well, the difference there is you would be instigating that meeting, that thing. If you found a group of people that, nothing can stop you as an individual, as a grown person, seeking anything you want. But
this legislation would prevent that. That's the very
yes, but it's because of what I said about kicking open the door. Because can you see how that can be abused? Can you see how you're like? I can understand you saying yes, that's what I want, 100%. I want to, because you could just say, yeah, I want electric shock therapy, but they'd have to check, right? Was this person of sound mind? But if you're just walking into a group of people that don't have your best interests at heart, and they're a group of people, so you feel like it's not like...
I feel a number of the practices your clients engage with you, I feel as we met in person, but it wasn't I'm judging or condemning you, but I feel practice of prostitution devalues the men accessing that service, that they're left feeling that they're worthless, that they can only get that level of intimacy by paying for it. So they feel a low self-worth. And for people like yourself who are accepting when it puts a price tag on the body and devalues them. Now, I have a moral objection to that practice and opening floodgates and the similar sort of language to you used about conversion practices, about your, I'll be used a polite term here, sex work. But for me to use the force of the law to prevent you, for me to force my beliefs onto your private world of what you're doing behind closed doors would be an aggressive act on my part.
Well, there's another dimension there, isn't there? That everybody is consenting and everybody knows what they're getting. Now,
and that's the case with counselling. It's usually reparative practice. It's not.
Yeah, but these things are tested. These things are tested over time, and we do know you could probably make a compelling argument against prostitution because women are harmed, women are exploited, or everyone, not just women, obviously. But these things are true, but that doesn't mean that we have a blanket approach to like the way society accept. It's not so much acceptance. It's just not acceptance of the idea of sex work. It's just accept that it happens. You can't erase it. So what are we going to do with it? That's where we're at. So, but I don't think I don't think it's analogous to conversion practices. That these are two very extreme things, opposites in a way. So the point I was making is once you allow people to have access or to give therapy, which could be classed as conversion practices, once if that's not illegal, then it opens the door for people that definitely want to abuse it. And we know historically that they have the evidence is there that they have. Now, with the conversion therapy ban, I don't like the word therapy in this context because I consider it abuse. Because of the trans element of that is where the grey area lies. Because there's this idea of gender affirmation. Now, when a trans person approaches a doctor or a counsellor, that doctor or counsellor is not there to affirm anything. They're just there to listen and to kind of box tick in a way of like, this person is saying the things that historically have been associated with being transgender. We think this person might be transgender. Let's refer them to somebody. Right now, that's how it works. It's not that at that stage. The only other alternative is to deny that person any help at all, isn't it?
No, there's a significant grey area between the two that again was explored by.
So where would you say that correct? I mean, because I'm really genuinely interested because it's something I've thought about because this idea of affirmation, the opposite of which is denial, is for some people that are transphobic, they think it's encouragement. They think the affirmation is somebody's encouraging somebody to be trans. That's the confusion. Now, the idea of being trans is a very spectral thing. Like you could change your name, you could start presenting a certain way, but never have any surgeries, never have any hormonal medication, and still be trans, right? Because those other things are choices. It's a choice whether I take hormones or not. It's a choice whether I have anything done to my body, but it is my choice. Now, that I think is where people find this grey area. So I'm genuinely interested in how you feel about that.
So I have serious concerns about transition being elevated to the status of like a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, to be held by somebody as a belief it's going to answer all their problems. So particularly when there's statistics of a very high level of autism in children and young people, there's very frequently underlying trauma and other mental health conditions. And it's very easy in the world of social media and the branding propaganda around that for somebody to build up the idea that the problems they're experiencing in their mind are due to the fact exclusively and that the transition will solve all those problems, and it very often doesn't. But as for the question of the grey area, example I'd give of that is a counsellor therapist asking challenging questions, not with the intention of undermining that person's beliefs and making them uncomfortable in an aggressive, hostile way, but the way Debbie Hayton articulated it, and other what some detransitioners have articulated, but they wish they were given the opportunity to make sure that they were absolutely certain.
Yeah, I understand those concerns, and I understand why, parents especially would have them. But the overwhelming statistics of every source of statistics says when people are allowed to express the thing that they wish to express and express it openly, they are happier. And that is the important thing for doctors and psychiatrists. It's not that they want to impose any kind of gendered ideology, as it's been called, onto them. It's just that they observe that young person, in rare cases, children do express more happiness and seem more well-adjusted, more able to express themselves, more confidence. Now, whether that should lead to any medical intervention is a separate issue entirely for me, because one of the problems we have, like, say if you were, say, a 15-year-old and you were telling your teachers, I might be trans, I've been reading about this online, I've heard about it. Teachers need to have a toolkit to be able to say to something to that child. They can't just ignore it. They can't pretend it's not happening if it's persistent. And so what would be good would be if that child didn't have to go and see a psychiatrist to have its name changed, if that child didn't have to go and see a psychiatrist to start wearing a different school uniform. And the change that would make that happen is self-ID. The child could simply express themselves as they feel they are without medical intervention. At the moment, you have to go down a medical route. There are no other options. If you're 15 or, like, I think the youngest trans person I've known through their family was 14 years old. Now, if you're that 14-year-old and you just want to express yourself and change your name and be the happy kid you want to be, you have to go and see a doctor. There's no other way. Now, that's the difference that self-ID would make.
I'm not the best person to have this conversation with. This topic we're going into now has been explored by lots of.
But I just wanted to explain that. I think that would be.
They don't have the capacity to consent to a tattoo or for sexual intercourse or marriage or other.
Well, it's a slightly different thing.
They have a level of immaturity, but they're vulnerable.
But we would have to say that there is competence in somebody that's 15, or, like I said, 14 is the youngest that I've known. And because of that, I would say that, we have to trust that child, and if their parents are, let's hope, understanding and caring and all the things you hope a parent would be, they would allow that child to express themselves in the way that makes them happiest. And I think that is the core of it for me. That's just something I wanted to get across. This was just like, because I know people listen.
I respect that's your opinion. We've got different beliefs than that. We're not going to be able to reconcile in this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was just as something personal. Like, I remember trying to have these conversations, and it was very difficult for me then because there was no gender clinic then. I remember going and seeing the doctor, and the doctor's just brushing it to one side, or it's just, you're just going through a phase kind of attitude. And I knew, and it was always there in my mind. It never went away from as long as I can remember. It never, that whatever it was that kept me asking about gender, kept me researching late at night on the internet. It never went away. I didn't get into something else. I didn't replace it with getting into, I don't know, whatever other fad. It wasn't a fad. It was just something that I had to keep talking about until somebody did something about it. So that's all I can tell you about my experience. But
not come on this interview to assess your.
I know, but I'm just conscious. I'm just conscious of when people listen to this, and I understand the concerns from the gender critical point of view that are, parental. They are trying to, when anything comes down to children, it's incendiary because there are people out there that know they can radicalize people by saying somebody's harming this. It's something that people on the right have done for eons. They used to do it to weaponize against gay people.
Well, I do believe that LGBT, all letters of it, is harming children and is extremely dangerous to be taught to children, and for children to be exposed to those ideas and encouraged.
But what if you're a child? What if you're a child and you're LG on that spectrum? You're supposed to deny it, are you, till you're 16, or just pretend it's not the case?
I don't believe that children, that people are born with an innate sexual orientation or gender identity. I'm aware that sexuality and dysphorias will develop at the age of puberty or later. But
puberty can start at 12.
And we understand as a society with laws and precedent that a 12-year-old cannot consent to sexual behaviour, cannot,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but
the emotional maturity to be able to.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but I just want to say, your sexual orientation isn't about who you have sex with necessarily, is it? You're kind of aware of desire. You're aware of what is affirmed and denied. You're aware of the things you find attractive. You're aware of the things that you look at on the television that appeal to you, because there are signs and signifiers of sex and gender. And just because somebody's, young, I know there are gay men I know who tell me, "Oh, I knew I was gay when I was 5," and I was like, "How did you know?" It's because I like.
And I don't believe them.
So you don't believe that?
I don't. No.
Yeah, but that's fair. I'm not asking. I'm not trying to convert you. I'll put you into my conversion chamber.
I'm very doubtful of that.
Okay, well that's fair enough. But I think the problem is when people talk about sex and gender, they confuse sex, like as in having sex, with this idea, because children do understand gender, right? They understand gender from day one because it's imposed upon them by parents. If there is such a thing as gender ideology, it's that thing where blue means for a boy and pink means for a girl. These are abstract concepts. They don't mean anything. But because, like say parents might decorate a bedroom in a certain way, that child is expected to be a certain thing. The gender ideology, if it exists at all, is that. It's that thing that parents impose upon their children. And then the boy or the girl is, "Oh, is this who I'm expected to be?" And maybe for 99.9% of kids, yeah, they'll like, the girl will like the Barbies and the boy will like. Yeah, but generally speaking, there's a lot of spectrum there. And if you're somebody that is like, I remember, I've got an older sister, so when I remember the kind of present she was bought, the way she was talked to, the things that were affirmed to her and the things that were denied were different from what was affirmed or denied to me. And I used to complain and say, "I want the things my sister's got," and I didn't think in terms of trans. I didn't even, that word wasn't even in my vocabulary at that point. But I knew that there was a difference, and I preferred the difference that my sister was getting. Now, whether that makes somebody trans or not, I don't know. But that is that what I was trying to say is that idea of gender and what you are it happens very young, I think. So that's distinct.
It doesn't sound incredibly clear to me that a child wanting to play with different toys, or the other very loose claims I've made with the.
Yeah, I can see that, but I mean, yeah, obviously, because
to children, I find very concerning. No teacher, parent, anybody working with children should be encouraging sexual thoughts and behaviour in.
Well, those are not sexual thoughts, are they? It's not a sexual thought to want to wear it. If a boy wants to wear a dress, that's not a sexual thought. That's a boy looking at what the girls are wearing and go, "I like that. That's something I like," and that's not necessarily gendered or sexuality. It's just
I don't think a diagnosis of a dysphoria or a path to gender reassignment should be inferred from a behaviour like that. But as I said, this is something we're going to disagree on.
Well, like, I know are you Christian?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's see, because my mum is religious. She's Roman Catholic, and I remember going to church. I mean, I don't go to church much now. Mum goes every Sunday, and I sometimes go with her. And I have got a lot of empathy with the people that go to that church because they're a community. And I think sometimes that's what's missing from our lives. Like a lot of our lives now are singular and like online, and we become an individual, like an avatar, like we said. And I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the community my mum has because she's got a whole bunch of people who just sit around, have coffee, and have nice conversations. They're not.
Yeah,
They might massively disagree about a lot of politics, but when I'm with those people, I don't feel judged. I don't feel, even though you'd think religious people would be the first people to, and I don't know what they say behind my back. Honestly, I'll admit to that. But with me, when I'm with them, I feel relaxed, and I'm jealous a bit of what my mum has, and I'm sad that it with my mum's generation it might go altogether, and I'm sad about that because like when I go for meetings at the LGBT Foundation, like so I've got a little bit of a community there, but it's not the same. It's not like unifying. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people are missing that. So
yeah, I understand.
so what's happened is
I've lived it.
people have become tribal, haven't they? So like your turfs, your TRAs, your TR, yeah, what do you call them? The ultras.
Ultras, the radicals.
They become very factional, and I think it's because the community, the idea of community, had been shattered, and it might sound a bit fanciful, but I think COVID has affected us more than we'll ever know, because that's when a lot of these hateful ideologies were incubated. And I saw the rise on Mumsnet because I used to watch people on there because I was researching. And I was one of the people that was saying, you know what, maybe, I'm not saying I agree with these people. I'm not saying they've got a point, but maybe there's something we need to look at here and stop looking at them individuals and stop hating people on Twitter. There's something going on here. And if we ignore it or we just say, oh, it's just the usual transphobes, there's definitely people that feel disempowered, and there's definitely people that feel insecure about a fast changing, well, like the world politically is in turmoil at the moment, isn't it? And I think added to all that, the insecurity of, you know, the government failing on lots of levels, there's a lack of leadership in all kinds of institutions. I think it's that people are scared of. And when they hear about trans people, it's like, oh my God, what's this? Now, they might have never thought about it in their lives.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like the word transition to me is a very important word because I think the whole world is in a transition. I think we're all in some kind of transition, but trans people have become the focus, the flashpoint, like the lightning rod, because literally the word transition comes up to do with us. Now, that's not really a good word, transition. Like it's not like a process where you go down a road and then you're done. There's no done. You know, we're always working things out. And I've learned a lot from talking to people that disagree with me, because online, sometimes you feel like you're talking to yourself, don't you? A lot of the time, you know. So
What I said to you over dinner, that I've seen a world and lived a world without God, around people who don't have God in their lives. And it's a world without any fundamental underlying value, when there's no truth, there's no value that's attached to other people. As Christians, you're people at church, myself, you know, we look at someone like you, Frida, and we know that you are very lovable and very loved. That's Christ's message, that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Now, I don't take the interpretation of God is love, God is also judgmental, and there's other sides to God's character. But everybody has an intrinsic value. We're taught to love our enemies, and is something that is, you're valuable as a person, not as a price tag to bring men pleasure when they come to visit you, or in my case, to be valued as a political, in your case too, as a political resource, you know, to be somebody that's useful for advancing some campaign, but if he's no longer useful, we'll chuck him in the bin. Or somebody who's useful to tag along with on nights out, but if he doesn't have the same politics as us, oh, he's in the bin. Christians don't look at, well, anybody that way, because we see people with an intrinsic value. And that's the same message, that's the very argument from which Jesus instructs persons like myself who have unwanted same-sex attractions to flee from sexual morality. His argument isn't flee from sexuality because you're worthless and unloved and you're going to go to hell and you don't mean anything at all. His argument is flee from sexual morality because you were bought at a price. And that price was Christ's death on the cross. It was an unimaginably steep price to pay, beyond our comprehension. And that is the message that I'd send to you and urge you to continue to talk to him.
Well, I think this is why I suggested you meet. You know, when I said
valuable, lovable, and loved, and that's the Christian gospel. But it's not a life without consequences where we can do whatever we want or what we want to do. The private sinful desires. It's a world of consequence and self-discipline, and that's the life I have for Christ as a Christian.
Well,
I'll wrap up there. But if you want to have the last word, yeah, go ahead. End on that positive note.
We don't want to have a last word necessarily. I just want to say I really appreciate that.
No, it's getting late. You know, we've been talking for a long time.
I'm just wanting to say, you know, I appreciate what you're saying, and I feel like you're very sincere when you say it. But from my point of view, I always look at things on a historical time. I look at colonialism and the effect Christianity has had on the world as a whole. And I find that some people like Mayor Forstater, Helen Joyce, Kelly J. Keane, they look at the world like that, on that colonial sense, where we're going to go into the world and make it ours and make it how we want it to be. And we don't like the bits of it we don't like. We can't just ignore them. We have to exterminate them. Now, that's a very strong word, but that is what Helen Joyce effectively, as I said, she wanted to do. And it's a colonial mindset. And that's the problem I have with religion, especially Christianity. So while I know you as an individual don't have those kind of colonial ambitions, the history of Christianity does. And that's the problem for me in believing anything, because I respect religious people, but I also read the history of the world through its eyes. You know, like I studied the history of art. And the history of art is a lot of religiousness in that, you know. So,
yes.
So, you know, I just wanted to say thanks for talking to me again, and I do want to meet up with you again in Manchester. I'm sure we will.
I'll be in Manchester next week.
Okay, I'll see you then. Bye for now. Bye.